Women of Reddit. What was your "that's it, I'm done then walked away" moment? I told my husband that he needed to lay off our daughter for getting a B on a unit in chemistry. She was asking to quit all her extracurriculars that she loved and didn't to get out of bed. I said we needed to be worried about her mental state. He said, well, if the kids aren't going to respect what I say, then maybe I should leave. It literally flipped the switch on my feelings for him. After 20 years together, instantly, our child was struggling and he was so self-absorbed that he could only think about himself. Done. Good for you. Your daughter is lucky you're her parent. When my parents threw my past abusive relationship in my face, when I called out my 45-year-old brother out for trolling university bars and taking advantage of drunk 20-year-olds and completely destroying their lives, all while leaving his 4-year-old with my 70-plus-year-old parents to take care of, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I said my piece and walked away from the mall. Haven't regretted it a single second, and my life has a lot less drama in it now. You were right. It takes a lot of strength and courage to do it, but you stood for what was right. He cheated, manipulated, gaslighting, called me crazy so many times in the couple years I stupidly put up with him, but it was one day he crossed a certain line I did not know I had. He called me a stupid bitch. For some reason that was it. I no longer felt weak, I felt true deep anger. I was so angry I threw all his stuff into the dumpster at my apartment. I never spoke to him again. It is so out of character for me to be an angry person or throw something away that is valuable. I felt so powerful. Almost the same happened to me. He broke up with me for the third time, but still had power over me. He called me constantly, first with the intent to reconcile, fake of course, then berated me if I tried to question his actions. So after that third breakup he obviously had called me in an attempt to humiliate me, and suddenly I had an epiphany. He was a horrible person, and if I didn't get out I would eventually kill myself. But instead of anger I felt completely indifferent, like all my feelings for him disappeared. I told him that I'm done, and boy did it not end well. How did it end? What a cliffhanger. We need answers. Not dealing with husband boyfriends, but toxic work men. I was sitting around the larger conference room to a meeting I was just casually involved in. I was of course the only woman. The director, a piece of human being, walked into the room and gave me his computer and said set it all up, and walked out. I had zero ducks to give anymore. I was recently back from mat leave and that same day he had the nerve to ask who the picture of the kid was. When I said my son he responded, "Oh, didn't realize that was you pregnant. Just fat." I didn't touch the computer or get anything set up. His little minions kept telling me to, and I said feel free. That's not my job. He walks in 5 minutes after the meeting should start with his director and asks why nothing is ready to go. I just smiled and said, not sure. Douche canoe, insert real name, is running this meeting. I applied out a week later and gave no notice. I did call hours and reported all after the fact. My ex was still living with his parents, and I came over for dinner with them. His mum had lit some candles in the dining room, and my ex decided that she was trying to poison him. He had just read an article about how even small fires can spread dangerous particles. Dinner ended up with him and his parents yelling at each other over the dinner table, with my ex wearing a gas mask and refusing to eat. Sorry, but I snorted at him wearing a gas mask. I don't know if this comment is allowed or too off topic, but I needed to read these replies for my hope in humanity. Thank you for posting. So many subreddits are filled with people of any gender putting up with absolutely deplorable behavior from people who are supposed to care about them and not realizing how not normal it is. I don't mean to victim blame. I grew up in one of those situations, so I know what it's like to be completely oblivious to the severity of it. It's just nice to hear the testimony of people that were able to come out the other side. I agree. It's such a liberating feeling to realize you're not alone. Love bombing. I got heaps of attention, then it slowed down. He would say that he would spend time with me, then not hear from him. I was getting hurt every time. I broke up with him, sure it hurt, but that would be the last pain. I'm in this situation right now. It's so hard to leave because of the love bombing. But after a week of fantasies of living together and baby talk, I ask about our relationship and he denies it all and asks for space. A week later he starts up again. It's pure torture. I know I need to leave. I know. You just want someone to love you and you hold on to what you have. It took me a month to decide. I discussed it with some friends who were there for me after I did it. When I came home from work after a 16-hour shift and he wanted to argue about something stupid. We had been having a lot of fights lately and I was over it. I just sat there thinking this is it. It's never going to change. I stood up and said I'm done, I'm going to bed, and starting walking to the bedroom. He yelled, get back here, I'm not done talking to you, and in that moment I was done. I looked at him and said nope, I'm done. We are done. Long story short, within a month I was in my new house and single. It was a mess. He didn't believe we were over because we had split up before and got back together, but that was the last time. Edit typo. My boss got so angry he threw pens near my face and kicked the printer so hard it broke. We worked alone together. When I told him he was being abusive and scaring me, he told me I wasn't cut out for this work. Quit and got a better job. I worked for a very abusive attorney who liked to refer to her office as hectic and fast-paced. I've since learned that's code for disorganized and needlessly stressful. The day I heard her tell another employee to go F herself, I knew I wouldn't be there much longer. I've also learned that it's a huge red flag when a potential employer asks if you have a thick skin. That's code for I'm an abusive arsehole and you will go home and cry every day if you are anything more than a soulless robot. They ask me about the thickness of my skin, and I nope out before they can even finish the question. Do I have thick skin? I don't tolerate abusive language or belittlement, if that's what you're asking. Or I value a professional and respectful work environment. When my date took me to a WW2 museum and said the Nazis weren't all that bad at it, lots of people asking me about this in DMs, so I'll just post it here. Basically, we decided to go on a date, and he thought taking me to a museum would be fun. He decided to take me a WW2 museum, which I thought was kinda odd. We looked at old tanks and weapons and uniforms, and eventually we got to this big war memorial that had pictures of American troops in uniform, Russian troops in uniform, and then the Nazi Germany SS in uniform. And that's when he said the Nazis weren't all that bad, and then he just stayed silent looking at the picture for a solid 5 minutes. Eventually I told him I needed to use the bathroom and I just left. When I got home I texted him telling him that what he said was super creepy and fucked up. He tried telling me what he meant to say was that their uniforms weren't all that bad, but it came out wrong. I didn't believe it for a second, because other people that also knew him, that I told the story to, said it made sense, since he was obsessed with Nazis. Guess no one wanted to tell me that when they all knew I was going out on a date with him equals vertical bar. Mayo at how he tried to backpedal and say their uniforms weren't that bad. He definitely meant what he said. Glad you ran off. This guy I met online randomly and chatted for a few days kept on begging that we meet. I don't do meetups without knowing a person for a long time, but this one kept on calling and asking for every update, until one day, he told me that if I won't go and meet up with him, he'll come to find me in my university. So reluctantly, I agreed to meet up with him for lunch on a restaurant halfway from both of our univs. During the meal, he started touching my leg. With that, I excused myself to the bathroom, called for a local motorcycle service, and got the hell out of the restaurant. Blocked him while I was on the trip home back to the dorm. What's a motorcycle service? It's like a taxi, but they ride motorcycle instead of cars. Common in a lot of countries where motorcycles/scooters are the main transportation. Up to this, it's like Uber, but for motorcycle rides. He had been gaslighting me for the entire relationship to the point I started recording what he was saying. He said something, and I disagreed, and told him he had said something else previously. He gaslighted me and started to get angry. When I adamantly refused to believe him, he told me I needed to go to the doctor to get on medication for my paranoia, even though I had what he originally said recorded. Smart move. After 5 years of severe abuse, Someone I had just met saw me take a phone call with my then boyfriend. He came up to me a few days later at our mutual friend's house and said, "I saw your face when you answered the phone. You looked upset and scared. It's not right for a boyfriend to make you look the way I saw you look." He wasn't doing it in a creepy way. He wasn't trying to get into my pants. He was just a nice guy, making an observation and checking to see if I was okay. Plenty of people in my life had told me to get rid of that asshole, but something about an acquaintance that I had just met making that observation just snapped me out of the fog I had been in. We became friends and he helped me get away. I'm convinced that that relationship would have killed me, and 15 years later, I'm still so grateful to him for essentially saving my life. My coworker would go on sexist rants and would find any excuse to talk s about attractive women who came to our bar. I had already complained to management about his racist and sexist remarks. He would drink on shift and become increasingly irate. The more he had to drink, the more he would follow you around and ramble. One day while working together, I found his gun in a drawer in the bar. Put in my 2 weeks the next day. No thank you. That was my final straw. Bartending was not worth getting shot by a drunken soul. As far as I know, nothing happened to him. At least I won't be there when he loses control and shoots somebody /view 200D. I'm glad you are safe. WTF. My ex-husband was very smart. A good guy deep down. He had a lot of potential. He also struggled very hard with depression and executive function. I didn't want to be his mom or push him too hard, so I played with kid gloves most of the time. I asked him to get help several times. He never listened. He graduated college after 10 years of trying and never applied to a single job. He sat around for 2 years doing nothing and then decided to aim for med school. I was dubious, but supported him. I hoped this would be the push he needed. He was very excited. He took some extra university courses. Did great. He spent 30 minutes at the birth of our son so he could get to class. He was dedicated. Then it came time to apply to med school. He had an entire year. Heads up about the due date of the application. 11:50 the night of the deadline. He sat there writing the essay portion because he'd never done it before. At 11:58, he attempted to submit it without copying what he'd wrote. The web page had been open too long and didn't submit properly. He lost all the work and gave up on applying that year. That was the night I started planning my exit. There were a lot of other things going on in our relationship, but that was the moment I knew I couldn't keep trying. As an aside, after I left he did apply and was accepted. It took him 6 years to complete the 4-year program. He graduated but failed the final test to be certified, so couldn't move on. He retook that a year later and passed, but now can't get a residency spot, can't get or didn't apply to any. Obviously I'm not privy to inside information anymore, haha. I've never been sorry I got away from that. This was a guy friend of mine. We dated when we first met, but soon discovered that we were better friends. We'd had a solid but distant friendship for about 5 years when this occurred. He had asked me to head out for a drink. He was bringing his new GF who I was excited to meet, and asked if it was okay to bring a workmate, as all 3 of them worked together. After I got there, their workmate actually approached me and introduced himself. Though it was odd he kinda knew me, I called my friend and asked if he was far off, and that's when he said that he and his girlfriend couldn't come, but I should stick around. That's when I realized what happened. I was single. He had a workmate who was looking for a hookup, and he set me up without any warning. I always knew he had an unhealthy need for male approval and friendship, but this was just so much lower than I thought he could go. I walked out of that bar without saying a word and haven't spoken to him since. And he hasn't reached out to me either. That hurt. That's really hurtful. You thought you had a good friend. He pumped you out as currency for friendship points. That's not how you set up blind dates. Called my in the middle of the night to tell me I was a W for wanting to do burlesque when I had classes the next day. A few other times I should have left but didn't. Nope. What an idiot. An idiot without taste. Because burlesque is super cool, feminine and elegant. It's awesome that you took burlesque classes. Thank you. It's really fun. and I hope to take more when it fits my life better. It didn't happen overnight, but two things. He wouldn't cook me dinner the day I came home from having abdominal surgery, and when my pet died whilst having an op at the vets, he wouldn't comfort me, nor would take me to say goodbye to them. In reality, the moment should have been the first few months, when he kept ghosting me on dates. For some reason I decided to stay and see where things went, but now I look back, and it was a major red flag. My mom abused me for 27 years, emotionally and financially. I was her doctor, therapist, bank, nurse, you get the idea with parentification. One day, she was talking about her drama again, something about my stepdad. I just snapped and said that I was quitting my job and moving to another state. She didn't believe me. I've been no contact for like 2 years now. Good for you. I got lucky and mine got sick and ended up in a nursing home for a few years and died at the beginning of the pandemic. It wasn't until after her death that I realized what kind of person she was. Yay therapy. Long distance relationship, but only a couple hours on a bus. We were having an argument about him guilt tripping me for not wanting to have sex while I was sick, which felt really out of character because he was really consent focused. I couldn't figure out where this argument was coming from, other than selfishness. At some point, he tried to say he didn't try to force himself on me. So what reason could I have to be upset? To hear him say out loud that he didn't think a woman has a right to be upset about sexual coercion unless it's actually an attempted rape, I threw my stuff in my bag, bought a new bus ticket, and walked out. Better yet, he called me a couple hours later asking when I was coming back, and was shocked that I was actually on the bus home, because apparently he thought I was just being dramatic to make a point, and that when I said I bought a new ticket and was leaving, he thought I was trying to manipulate him into chasing me or something, and expected me to be just pouting in a park waiting for him to call. Like, no, a shat. I have never done that and would never. I'm halfway home. We are done. Close bracket. My hospital told me that it was okay for me, a non-stroke certified nurse, to be charge nurse of the stroke unit due to short staffing. Absolutely not. Not safe for me, all the new grads, and the patients. Administration told me it would be fine because I personally wouldn't have stroke patients myself. But I'm just there because I know hospital policy/procedure and that I wouldn't have any responsibility if something were to go wrong. Haha. No, have you been following the Ravondavort case? They also expected this on top of working nights without administrative support. Always had one in the building, but they all quit. Sometimes lab/fleb wouldn't show, and we wouldn't know. One respiratory therapist in-house. It was too much, but that charge situation broke me and I left. And life is great now. And guess who had to shut down their stroke unit? Were you on my floor? I worked on a horrible neuromed-surg floor and I would have to help the floats chart neuro assessments. Looking back, that was just messed up for everyone. Maybe 8 patients with charge and precepting? Fuck, no. He constantly talked over me when he didn't like the stuff I had to say. I ended up keeping a list of stuff to bring up to him when I got the chance, and the list just kept getting longer and longer. Didn't realize how stressed I was and how much resentment had built up in me until I talked to a friend and everything came spewing out. Broke things off immediately after that. This reminds me of my relationship with my estranged husband. He didn't talk over me, but he refused to acknowledge anything that wasn't pleasant. Made him look bad, even the tiniest amount, or was occurring during an inconvenient time. I had the longest list of huge problems stemming from a decade ago that still hadn't been addressed. He had the audacity to tell me that I wanted to be miserable and that I didn't know how to move on. I realized that he didn't care about how I felt at all. He just wanted me to behave, and my actual feelings about him or our lives meant nothing to him. He knew that I didn't have any options for leaving, so he would just do what he wanted and act like everything was fine, while completely tuning me out until enough time had gone by that he could slap the "you still care about that." That was years ago. You must be very mentally unwell, and it has nothing to do with me card on the table. I decided I would rather be homeless than continue in this relationship that was causing me serious anxiety and depression because I had no reason to believe he'd ever behave differently. I wish it hadn't taken me so long to realize this, but I do give myself some slack because I didn't realize how many secrets he had until I was 4 months postpartum from having our twin daughters. I was very fragile and it was a really bad time to have my wife on my part, but at the same time it makes sense because my husband is only present and attentive when I have any power of my own. I realized I was done about a year ago, which was already a year into him officially leaving me. He now says his wish is to work things out, and I swear it's because he can just tell that I'm over it / him. Although I can't completely cut ties from him, and right now I can't support myself. I really am done with trying to force him to like me and care about my feelings. Even if I have to stay legally married to him for a bit longer than I'd like to, my heart is free, and I know myself, and I know that there's no way I'm going back to him. It became clear he was not over his ex. No thank you to that kind of drama. He asked me to babysit his toddler because it was an emergency. Apparently he had an emergency every week. This final time his daughter was being an absolute nightmare, begging for her daddy. Another girl I was friends with posted a picture on Instagram with him drinking. Other petty and me Wolf called the cops and said he dropped this kid off and now he won't answer. He was supposed to be back in 5 minutes. It's been hours. I can't take care of her. It would be really fun for him to answer to the cops and probably Child Protective Services what happened. When he insisted relentlessly to have sex on a first date before even meeting me. Well, on the plus side, that's a time saver for both of you. He said from the beginning that he wanted a relationship, not hookup. THTSY I still tried talking for some time, only to realize he basically wanted to have a hookup for 3 to 4 times with a girl, having real feelings for him to fulfill his physical as well as emotional needs. Plus he didn't want to invest himself emotionally. Such an asshole. Playing Final Fantasy 13, I was like 2 more rounds away from killing a boss. I spent like 1.5 hours fighting, suddenly used a super move, and killed my whole party in one swipe. It was such a colossal waste of time. Never played it again. I'll let that game trick me for like 40 hours. I kept telling myself wait no, cause the next part is where it gets good. I think I heard once you get to chapter X that's when it finally gets good. You said it best. Colossal waste of time. Josh Strife said it best. If your game does take 100 hours to get good, it is not a good game. Why not make the first 100 hours the good part? Why make a game where you must suffer through bad parts to get to the good ones? This endgame focused thinking is kinda killing all MMOs. It had been an awful emotionally abusive relationship up until the point it turned physical. He choked me while I was driving and tried to drive the car off the road. Situation isn't funny, but I do get a quick laugh when I remember he acted that way because I wouldn't text his mom for him to ask if he can stay at my place. I was still in high school at the time. Yikes. Good thing you got out of there. We had been in a relationship for almost a year and the whole time he was manipulating and gaslighting me to a point where I broke down one night. I had been going through a lot at the time with family and losing my job over the pandemic, and he knew I was struggling mentally. When I left the bedroom after I broke down, he went to bed. I called my sister and she calmed me down. I went to sleep crying, and the next morning he told me that he thought I would try to commit suicide. And when I asked him why he didn't follow me out if he thought that, his response was that he was tired and needed to sleep. He was sure I was suicidal, yet he wanted to sleep. I knew we were heading towards an end to our relationship, but I didn't think it was that bad. Needless to say, I dropped off all his belongings that were at my place a few days later. Gentle hugs for you. I hope you're in a better place now that you're free from him. Gaslit me and was emotionally abusive the whole time, but I didn't snap out of it until outside people were telling me I was being treated badly. The last straw was when he spilled a drink in my car. I told him he would have to clean it up, and he proceeded to yell at me in front of my friends that were with us. There were lots of other moments before that, but I knew I was done for sure at that moment. I had tolerated his bullshit and emotional manipulation for about 4 years. One day, my sister was in town and I booked us a car to go to a far off hiking spot. I had a cold that time BTW, but I pulled through. When we were going back, it was the evening and the car rack was bothering my cold a little too much. He was driving because he was the only one with a license. I asked him to turn off the AC because I was not feeling well. He said that if I was that bothered by the AC, I should go sit in the back. Lol. That was the day I realized how little he cared about me. I felt terribly sick after that day for a week and I never heard from him. I lost every bit of love and care I had for him that day. It took me several months to realize that apart from emotional manipulation, all he did was exploit me for money and sex. I hate him so much.